Hi guys, Pete Mazaris, the Home Inspector Mentor. I'm going to talk to you today about report writing, basic report writing, and what I think you should be focusing on when you're writing the report. And this is certainly for those of you who are new to home inspecting and you're just starting to get your feet wet. You've had some training, had some education, and now you're practicing on writing reports. You're doing hopefully practice reports on friends and family's homes, your own house, so that you can get used to working with the software that you've chosen to work with, and you are getting used to collecting data. And so I have always been a big fan of collecting the inspection data with a digital camera and a voice recorder and not actually populating the report on your handheld device when you're on site. And the reason for that, I think I've explained before, is for efficiency. And so we can go into that in more detail in another video. But for now, as you are writing, developing, composing your report to generate that report, you have to remember some things that report should include. And the things to include are for your client's benefit and their realtor's benefit, the benefit of the seller who might be asked to make repairs based on your recommendations. And if they have your report, they have to be able to understand what you're saying. And otherwise, you're just going to get a bunch of phone calls all the time from listing agents and sellers asking you to clarify what your repair recommendations are. So I know on one hand that's good to get contact from sellers and realtors so that maybe you can get inspections from them. But in this case, when they're calling you for clarifications because your report's not clear, actually that's not a great showing on your part, because that report is the product of your work, as you know, and it has to represent the findings that you put in, that you have from the inspection and communicated via that report as the written record for go forward for anything. And obviously, initially, that report communicates to your client the condition of the property in your eyes and the recommendations for things to be done and the urgency of such in your eyes. And after that, it's going to be looked at by perhaps the buyer's realtor, who has to then take your report, decipher it, and make recommendations back and forth with the buyer, or actually have a discussion back and forth to the buyer so that they can go ahead and put that list of your recommendations that they feel that they'd like to negotiate with the seller into the ROC, or release of contingency document. That's going to go back to the listing agent and the seller for negotiation or concession. And so your report has to be easily decipherable. And there is a challenge in some of today's commercial reports for that to occur. And that's not the topic of this particular video. We're going to dive into that in the future. But for now, I'd like you guys to focus on a few things. As you're starting to get used to writing reports, or maybe you're already writing reports, I've, over the years, picked up some, I think, best-in-class practices when it comes to writing reports. And so the first thing is that when I'm writing a report, every single defect or call for action or recommendation for action is going to have at least one picture of that defect. And of course, that defect description, recommendation, action is also going to be specific as to where that defect is located. Okay, so that's number one. That's very basic. Number two, you should also have general pictures that you take showing the condition of the section that you are inspecting. For instance, on the roof, you're going to have a set of pictures for every defect that you identify, and then you're going to have general pictures that will show the condition of that component, in this case the roof, during or at the time of your inspection. So those pictures will all go into your report. No, I'm not a big fan of taking 1,000 pictures and only putting 200 of them in the report and then taking the remaining 800 and squirreling them away in some file somewhere. You know, if you're going to take 1,000 pictures, then go ahead and put 1,000 pictures in the report. Yeah, that's a little excessive, but in my opinion, if you're using one of the commercial software reporting programs, and even if you're not, you can never take too many pictures. So those pictures are going to serve as a verification of the condition of the general section that you're inspecting, whether it's the roof, the exterior, the attic, the interior, the electrical system, plumbing system. You should always have extra pictures. In fact, the mentality that you can never take too many pictures should be part of your philosophy. So those pictures will serve as indicators in your report of what you've looked at. And so if you take a picture of the incoming water meter, let's say, and the gas meter and the hot water tank, even though there's no issues with them, you know, if somebody says, hey, did you inspect the water meter? We say, well, yeah, it's right there in the report. There's a picture of it. So these pictures also serve as your backup in case you ever have a complaint or a callback, which you will in this business, and that's another topic of another video, or you get an attorney demand letter or an attorney who wants to sue you on behalf of their clients, which is part of this business as well. And so your report having that documentation, though all those pictures inside of the report, will serve as a record for defending yourself in case you do have either a callback, a complaint, or there is a lawsuit on your former buyer's behalf. And of course, it works the other way. If the picture record shows that you missed something, then you know what? You need to own up to it and make it right. So we are going to populate these reports with a picture for every single defect, and we're going to have a lot of FYI pictures showing the condition of different components and areas. If you take the electrical panel, dead panel off to inspect the wiring, which the standard requires you to, if there's no defects in that panel, you're still going to take a picture of that panel showing the wiring, at least one. Okay, same thing with the furnace. You're going to take the furnace dead cover off. You're going to take a picture of the furnace running, showing the maybe the gas burners or whatever firing on, so that you have that pictorial documentation in your report. Now, the other thing you have to keep in mind is, as you are going through and building your reports, that you are adhering to the standard of the state or the the industry standard that you are subscribing to in your inspection agreement that your client signs. So if I were to audit your report, which I'm happy to do, and I've done it before, for other inspectors, obviously, if I'm auditing your report, I'm going to be thinking about how you are reporting against the standard, because you have to, that report then has to show as a record that if someone were to look at the report after the inspection, weeks, months, years later, how would anybody know that you inspected the house to the standard? So you have to provide certain documentation that you checked everything, okay? And there's different ways to do that. There's checklist style reports. We use FYI comments in ours when there's no defects, but we prove that we've checked and inspected something and we've reported on the condition of it. And so you have to do that. And at the same time, you also need to disclaim when you're unable to do that. So if you're unable to remove the dead panel from the electrical service panel to inspect the wiring and identify the service entrance cables, then you have to make that disclaimer in your report and say that client has a blockage of the panel, which, by the way, is a safety issue that needs to be removed, and it's the reason why we couldn't inspect the panel. Or we couldn't inspect the plumbing because the main water was turned off, or we couldn't inspect the full amount of the foundation on the interior because of shelving and storage. Same thing with garages. The entire garage wasn't accessible for inspection because of vehicles in the garage or whatever. And so those are very important things that you're going to want to have placed in your report. So as you're building that report, you're going to have in your finished product, you should show the inspection agreement, the standard that you're inspecting to, the description of items that are required to be described by the standard that you subscribe to, and that could be its own separate page, as well as your commentary and narrative as you go through and inspect each and every installed component per the standard. And so by the time you get through the report, you're going to have built a report that is fluid. It flows from section to section, or I know some reports are done room by room. We prefer to do it section by section. And so you're going to have that report that has the summary of your findings, pictures of all the defects, the recommendations of what to do when a defect is found, such as, okay, there's a double tap in the electrical panel, and double taps are a problem because two solid strand wires under a single set screw is not good, because compression is not going to be equal on both wires, and so therefore one can work its way loose as current travels through solid strand wiring, and it heats up and it contracts and it moves, and so therefore one of them can come loose, and that's why it's against code. Recommend correction is required by a licensed electrician. So what you've done is you've identified the defect, you've described to the client why that defect's a problem, and then you've described what the recommended action to take is to take care of that defect. So those three things should be present in all of your defect call outs, unless it's self-evident, like if it's a leaking kitchen sink pipe, you're just going to say leaking drain pipe should be fixed. There's no need to, go into the detail of why that you need to fix a leaking drain pipe, right? That's called something that's self-evident. But not everybody knows, why a double tap in an electrical panel needs to be fixed. So you should provide that as part of your boilerplate commentary in your reporting. And so if you do that and have your reports that are laid out in a manner that meets the standard, proves that you inspected to the standard, and also describes the defects as we just talked about with pictures. And then you have FYI pictures of the general sections. And then you have your disclaimers of, what you weren't able to check. Then that's pretty much the basics of, putting together a inspection report. So if you want to see how we put together our reports, it's you can simply go to our inspection website at Detailed Home Inspections, clevelandohio.com, and then click on the link for our sample reports. And then you can get a good view of how we've set up and how we've constructed our inspection reports. Of course, we have commercial inspection reports on there as well as residential reports. So, feel free to take a look at that. I think it might be helpful to you guys. All right, thanks.